Alien girl asked the human to hold her broken device, and what it recorded shifted his heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The maintenance ring of Outpost 12 hummed with its usual midnight rhythm, a low mechanical breathing that wrapped around Ethan Cole as he walked the narrow metal walkway. The temperature hovered just below comfortable, the kind of chill that seeped into his sleeves and made him pull his jacket tighter. He liked this hour. Quiet floors, steady lights, machines that didn't argue. Then a sharp pop cracked through the corridor like a snapped wire. A thread of blue light flashed behind a bulkhead door, followed by a soft clatter, delicate, almost like something small had fallen. Ethan paused, resting his fingertips on the cool railing, listening for anything out of place. Just the faint ozone smell drifting into the hall told him enough. Something electronic had blown. He pushed the door open and stepped into the dim service bay. The air felt warmer here, tinted with that sharp scent of burnt circuitry. And there, near the corner where the conduit tower met the wall, sat a girl. No, an alien young woman, with skin the pale blue of early dawn. Leary. He'd seen her around the station, always quiet, always carrying that small oval device pressed close to her chest. Now she knelt on the grated floor, shoulders tight, fingers trembling as she held the cracked device in both hands, as if afraid it might crumble. When she looked up at him, her eyes caught the amber ceiling lights, glowing like polished glass. I need help, she whispered, voice thin but steady. She lifted the device slightly. Can you hold it? Just hold it steady for a moment. Ethan nodded before he even thought about it. He moved closer, careful not to startle her. The air between them carried a soft hum from the conduit tower, a faint warmth that brushed the side of his face. When she placed the device in his hands, he felt how light it was, lighter than it looked, with a faint vibration running through the cracked shell. The metal felt warm, almost alive. Leary took a slow breath, her shoulders dropping a fraction, as though the simple act of handing it over had released some invisible weight. Ethan kept his grip steady, his thumbs resting on the least damaged edge. No questions, no pressure, just stillness. The kind of stillness machines never gave him, but people sometimes needed. A tiny flicker of light pulsed under the fractured seam, reflecting softly on his fingers. He didn't know what the device truly was, but he could feel, without any logic, that it mattered to her, that it was more than a tool or a gadget. And in that quiet bay, wrapped in soft thrum of outpost machinery and the faint blue glow brushing against his hands, something in Ethan's chest shifted, subtle as a change in air pressure, but real enough to make him exhale slower, steadier, as if matching the calm she was trying so hard to find. The device pulsed again in Ethan Cole's hands, a faint shimmer that trembled along the cracked seam, and Leary leaned closer, as if listening to something only she could hear. The service bay lights buzzed softly overhead, their warm yellow glow reflecting off the pale blue of her skin. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself, but Ethan could see the tightness in her jaw and the way her fingers hovered near the device, as though she wanted to take it back, yet could not make herself do it. It is trying to reboot, she murmured, not quite looking at him. But it needs a stable field to finish. Ethan nodded, adjusting his grip the way he would with any delicate tool. I can hold it steady, he said. His voice was calm, the same tone he used on malfunctioning processors and scared new recruits on their first week. The hum inside the device smoothed out, becoming a softer vibration. It almost felt like a heartbeat. Leary stepped around him, studying the air above the device, her eyes following some invisible pattern. She lifted her hand, palm open, and for a moment it looked like she was catching the warmth radiating from the broken shell. The air carried a faint scent of something metallic and sweet, like warmed copper mixed with a distant breeze. You work nights often, she said quietly. It was not a question, more like an observation drifting into the room. Ethan shrugged, keeping his attention on the faint pulses of light. Machines do most of their complaining after midnight. Someone has to listen. Leary almost smiled, a tiny curve at the corner of her mouth that flickered like a hesitant spark before fading behind her composed expression. Her gaze flicked to his hands again. "You are steady," she said. "Most humans are louder. Faster. They rush too much." Ethan breathed out a quiet laugh. "I guess I did not get the memo." The device buzzed sharply, and both of them froze. A small holographic flicker tried to form above the cracked seam, but the image wavered and collapsed. Leary touched the air gently, her fingers barely breaking the space above the projection. The movement was delicate, almost reverent. Ethan could feel something shift in her posture, a tension he had not noticed before, like she was holding herself together in too many places. "Do you want me to open the casing?" he asked. "I can check the internal stabilizer." "No," she said quickly, a little too quickly. "Please do not open it. It must stay whole." Ethan nodded again. No pressure, no questions. Just presence. He steadied the device against the faint tremor in her voice. A soft tone sounded from the small wall console, just the system clock marking another minute past midnight. The station's mechanical breath rose and fell in a slow rhythm, matching the pulse of the dim lights. For a long moment, Leary did not speak. She stood beside him, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her shoulder, though she never touched him. "Thank you for holding it," she said finally, her voice lower, almost fragile. "It has not been steady in a long time." Ethan did not answer right away. He just kept the device balanced, feeling the slight vibration soften under his grip, and somewhere inside that quiet bay, he wondered what kind of weight she had been carrying alone before this moment. The faint pulse in the device softened in Ethan Cole's hands, settling into a quiet vibration that felt almost like it was breathing. He kept his grip steady, letting the warm hum travel through his palms and up his forearms, while the service bay's overhead lights shimmered along the pale blue of Leary's skin. She had gone still, as if waiting for something she could not name. Her eyes followed the flicker inside the cracked shell, searching for a pattern only she would recognize. Ethan watched her carefully out of the corner of his eye, noticing how she drew her arms closer to herself, not out of fear, but as if she were holding in a thought she was not ready to speak. "It is stabilizing," she whispered. "The core memory might surface if it feels constant." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we will keep it constant." She looked at him sharply for a moment, as though surprised that someone would offer steadiness so easily. The hum of the station deepened around them, the long metal ribs of Outpost 12 expanding softly as the night cycle heaters adjusted. A low amber light blinked along the far wall, marking the late hour, though neither of them acknowledged the time. Leary shifted her weight, stepping just a little closer. "You asked no questions," she said quietly, her voice almost absorbed by the room's soft mechanical breathing. "Most humans ask many." Ethan kept his gaze on the hairline fracture running across the device's surface. "People talk a lot when they are uncomfortable. But this does not look like something you want talked about." She blinked, the faint shimmer in her eyes reflecting the warm ceiling glow. "You read people well for someone who walks alone at midnight." Ethan shrugged, the gesture soft. "Less noise makes it easier." The device flickered again, and a faint projection shimmered above it. Just a faint shape, like the outline of a small hand reaching upward before dissolving into static. Leary inhaled sharply, but she did not touch it. Her fingers curled at her sides, nails lightly grazing her palms. Ethan steadied the shell, keeping the projection from collapsing too quickly. The glow cast a soft reflection on his wrist, a small trembling ribbon of blue light. "It remembers voices," she said, her words barely audible. "It keeps the last ones it heard." Ethan lifted his eyes to her, letting the quiet settle around them. "Someone important?" Leary's throat tightened. He saw the small shift, the way she swallowed down an ache before it surfaced. "My sister," she said finally, each word placed carefully, like stepping on fragile ground. "The device holds her last message. It has been cracked since the day she vanished. It only works in pieces now." The projection flickered, showing another blurred shape before fading again. Ethan felt the weight of her silence more than her words. He did not speak. He did not offer sympathy or promises. He simply adjusted his grip, giving the device the steady feel it needed. Leary watched him with a slow, searching look, as though trying to understand how a stranger could treat her memories with such careful hands. The station's soft hum filled the space between them. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words fragile but sincere. It has never stabilized this long. Ethan breathed out through his nose, slow and warm. Then we will keep it steady for as long as it needs. For the first time since he had entered the bay, Leary allowed her shoulders to ease, just a little, as though letting someone else hold a weight she had carried alone for too many nights. The projection faded back into the device with a soft sigh of static, leaving only the faint pulse of light beneath the cracked seam. Ethan Cole kept his hands steady, letting the warmth of the shell settle against his palms while the service bay's dim ceiling lights buzzed above them. Leary stood close enough for him to feel the quiet rise and fall of her breath, though she never touched him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the device, but her posture had shifted in a way that was subtle and unmistakable. The stiffness in her shoulders had loosened, replaced by something fragile, almost trusting. The station clock beeped once, marking a new hour, and the sound echoed softly against the metal walls. Leary exhaled slowly. "It is holding longer than I expected," she said. Her voice carried a new tone, quieter but warmer, as if the edges of her words had softened. Ethan nodded. "It just needs a calm environment. Everything works better without pressure." She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone studies a tool that works differently than expected. "You speak like a stabilizer technician," she said. Ethan gave a small, dry smile. "I fix what I can, and I hold steady what I cannot fix." Leary's eyes lingered on him, the amber reflections dancing in the depths of her pale blue irises. For a moment, she seemed to forget the device entirely. Then the projection flickered again. This time it formed a clearer outline before trembling at the edges. A faint voice, high and soft, brushed the air like a breeze sliding past metal vents. Leary's breath hitched, but she did not pull away. Ethan adjusted the angle carefully, supporting the weakened side with the edge of his palm. The hologram wavered into the shape of a small figure, no taller than a child, reaching upward with an uncertain gesture. The moment was brief, just a heartbeat, but it held a weight that tightened the room's silence. Leary looked away, her jaw tightening. "I should not be asking you to do this," she said. "This is not your burden." Ethan shook his head gently, eyes still on the flickering light. "It is not a burden to help someone carry something important." The projection dissolved again, a soft shimmer falling back into the damaged core. The device's vibration steadied under Ethan's hands, responding to the quiet, patient hold he maintained. Leary's breathing slowed. She stepped toward him until the shadows of her figure blended with the glow around his wrists. "You do not look at it the way others do," she said softly. "They see technology. You see meaning." Ethan did not answer immediately. The hum of Outpost 12 filled the pause with its steady mechanical rhythm, the station's metal framework expanding and settling like a slow heartbeat. Finally he said, "Things matter when they matter to someone. That is enough." The simple truth of the statement hung between them. Leary's eyes softened, the tension in her expression giving way to something that looked like a quiet ache. She looked at the device again, then at Ethan's hands holding it with a care she had not expected from anyone. "It remembers her," she whispered. "Even when I cannot face it." Ethan's voice was low. "Then we will face it slowly. Together." The pulse inside the device answered with a gentle shimmer, steady and warm, as if acknowledging the first moment in a long time when it did not tremble alone. The device's quiet pulse shifted again, softer now, almost like it was matching the slow rhythm of the station's midnight cycle. Ethan Cole adjusted his hands only enough to keep the cracked shell balanced, feeling the faint warmth radiating through his palms. Leary stood beside him, her posture less guarded than before, the pale blue glow of her skin catching the amber lights overhead. She watched the device with an expression that blended hope and dread, the kind of mixture that said she wanted answers but feared what those answers might hold. The service bay felt different now. The usual metallic chill had warmed slightly, softened by the hum of conduits and the steady presence they shared. Leary drew a slow breath, her voice barely above the mechanical whisper filling the room. "It has not held a projection this long since she disappeared." Ethan nodded, eyes on the thin fracture running across the device. Maybe it just needed someone to hold it steady for a while. Leary gave him a look he could feel more than see, a quiet studying gaze that lingered longer than before. Her hands hovered near the hologram emitter, not quite touching. "It responds to emotional resonance," she said. "Our devices are built to recognize stability. That is why it never worked around the others." They were too guarded. Ethan breathed a soft laugh. You mean too stressed to hold anything steady? Leary's lips curved slightly, a small, fleeting shape of amusement. Perhaps. The device flickered again, its light swelling before forming a dim, wavering silhouette above Ethan's hands. This time, the projection did not collapse immediately. A soft hum filled the bay, and a faint voice, childlike and gentle, drifted through the air. Leary's breath caught, and she pressed her hand to her chest. Ethan did not speak. He shifted his weight only enough to stay balanced, letting the warm vibration settle deeper into his palms. The hologram shaped itself into a small figure, a child with the same pale blue glow as Leary, though blurrier and edged with static. The figure reached upward again, the movement soft and hesitant. Leary whispered. That was her last gesture. She always reached up so I would pick her up. Ethan felt the ache in her voice, not loud but deep, like it had been waiting for air. She looks brave, he said quietly. Leary shook her head. She was frightened. But she never wanted me to know. The projection shimmered, flickering between clarity and distortion. Ethan instinctively steadied his grip, giving the device the consistency it needed. Leary's eyes glistened, reflecting the trembling blue light. There is something it has not shown since that day, she murmured, voice tightening. Something I could never recover. The hologram wavered, forming a brief image of a small hand pressing against a surface, followed by a soft whisper that barely reached the air before dissolving. Leary closed her eyes, letting out a breath she had been holding for far too long. Ethan spoke gently. If it comes back, we can watch it. If it does not, we still hold what is here. Leary opened her eyes slowly. For the first time, she looked directly at him, not as a stranger or as someone accidentally in the room, but as someone who had stepped quietly into a grief she had kept locked behind years of silence. You are not afraid to stand close to sorrow, she said quietly. Most people are. Ethan kept the device steady, his voice calm. Maybe it is easier when you know what it feels like. The projector pulse softened, settling into a warm glow that illuminated both of their hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, sharing the soft hum of memory and the silent understanding that had begun to form between them. The hologram dimmed back into the cracked device with a gentle flicker, leaving only the soft glow pressed against Ethan Cole's palms. The service bay felt suspended in a kind of quiet that did not belong to machines, a stillness shaped by shared breath and unspoken understanding. Leary stood very close now, her pale blue skin reflecting the amber lights in faint ripples, as if absorbing the warmth instead of casting it. She watched the device with a gaze both hopeful and hesitant, the kind of look that said she wanted more answers, but was afraid of what those answers might cost. Ethan kept the shell steady, his fingers supporting the fractured edge with careful pressure. It is strange, she murmured, her voice almost carried away by the low hum of the conduits. Your hands are warmer than the stabilizing plate. He gave a small laugh under his breath. That plate has terrible bedside manner. Leary's expression softened, a tiny glow of amusement rising in her eyes before fading back into something more reflective. Humans give warmth easily, she said quietly. Sometimes too easily. It confuses other species. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Does it confuse you? Leary hesitated, the kind of hesitation that meant yes. Long before she spoke. It surprises me, she said. The projection flickered once more, forming a faint outline that stretched upward like a reaching gesture they had already seen. But this time, the image did not stay. It dissolved too quickly, leaving a wash of soft blue light across their hands. Leary drew in a slow breath, her fingers curling at her sides. It is incomplete, she whispered. There is a part missing. The part she meant for me. Ethan adjusted the device gently. What part? Leary's eyes lifted to his, and for the first time they carried something sharper, something like vulnerability, but wrapped in a thin layer of instinctive caution. The message she tried to send. Her last words. The device recorded the moment, but the audio fractured before I could hear it. She paused, her voice tightening. I have spent years wondering what she wanted to tell me. Ethan nodded slowly, the quiet weight of her words settling between them like a physical presence. Sometimes, he said softly, people try to say goodbye. Sometimes they try to say something else. Either way, it takes strength to listen. Leary looked down at the device again, her lashes casting faint shadows along her cheeks. Humans speak of strength differently, she murmured. Your strength is not the same as ours. It is softer, quieter. It moves inward instead of outward. Ethan held her gaze, letting the truth of her observation settle. Quiet does not mean weak. She studied him for a long moment, her expression shifting with a thought she did not voice. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "My people do not understand why humans help those who cannot repay them. To us, it is illogical." Ethan shifted his grip slightly, keeping the device balanced. "Maybe it is not about repayment," he said. "Maybe it is about knowing how it feels to need help and not get it." Leary's breath caught in her throat, a soft sound she tried but failed to hide. The hologram shimmered again, weaker this time, as if responding to the moment rather than the device's circuitry. She stepped even closer, the warmth of her presence brushing the air near his shoulder. "Ethan," she said quietly, "your people confuse me more every minute." Ethan's voice lowered, steady and warm. "We are confusing, but not complicated." The device answered with a soft pulse, steady for the first time, and the room felt smaller, warmer, as though memory and emotion had begun to form their own quiet gravity around them. The soft pulse inside the cracked device held steady for a moment longer, then dimmed to a faint glow, as if resting between breaths. Ethan Cole kept his palms gently cupped around it, steady and warm, while Leary watched every flicker with an intensity that made the air feel charged. Outpost 12's night cycle wrapped the service bay in a muted hush, broken only by the low hum of machinery shifting into its slow, energy-saving rhythm. The lights along the ceiling dimmed slightly, casting long amber reflections across the metal floor. Leary exhaled, the sound thin but controlled. "It is growing tired," she murmured. "The core is fighting to hold the memory, but the fracture limits how long it can maintain stability." Ethan nodded, careful not to adjust his grip too abruptly. "Then we let it rest. Devices get tired the same way people do." Leary gave him a quiet look, one that lingered not on his hands but on his face, as though his calm unsettled something deep within her. "Humans compare everything to people," she said softly. "Even machines." Ethan smiled slightly. "Maybe it helps us understand things we cannot fix." Leary stepped closer, the faint glow of her skin brushing the edge of the light around his hands. The distance between them had tightened again, without either of them meaning to. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, "there is something I did not tell you. Something important." He lifted his eyes, steady, waiting without pushing. Her gaze dropped to the device, and the tension in her shoulders returned, subtle but unmistakable. "My sister was not supposed to have this," she whispered. "The device was meant for me. She activated it by accident. When it shattered, our people believed it malfunctioned because she was too young to handle it." The corners of Ethan's brows softened. "But you do not believe that." A slow shake of her head. "No, I think she was trying to send something. Something only I would understand. And when the device broke, everyone assumed the message was lost forever." Ethan felt the faint tremor of the device against his palms, a weak echo of the earlier projection. "You think it can still reveal something?" Leary's breath wavered. "I do not know. But part of me fears the truth as much as I long for it." She stepped closer again, and this time she let her fingertips rest lightly on the edge of the device. Not on his hands, but close enough that he felt the warmth radiating through the air between them. "My people do not believe in revisiting pain," she said quietly. "We are taught to move forward always, never backward. Memory is considered unnecessary weight." Ethan studied her face, the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes shimmered under the lights. "Memory is not weight," he said. "It is connection, even when it hurts." Leary closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words settle. Then she opened them slowly, and something had shifted there, something deeper and more uncertain. "You are different from anyone I have met," she whispered. "You hold things with care, not just objects." Ethan did not break eye contact. Sometimes things break because they have been carried alone for too long. A quiet silence stretched between them, warm and steady. The device pulsed weakly, as if trying to join the moment. Leary looked down at it, then back at him. "If the final memory surfaces," she said, her voice barely audible, "I want you to be here when it happens." Ethan nodded once, slow and sincere. "I will be." And in that stillness, surrounded by metal walls and the soft hum of machines, a quiet agreement formed, unspoken but deeply understood, as the fragile device glowed faintly between their hands. The dim glow inside the cracked device steadied once more, as if gathering strength for something it had held back for years. Ethan Cole did not move, keeping his palms gently cupped around it, the warmth sinking into his skin. Outpost 12's night cycle had grown heavier, the lights overhead now lowered to their faintest amber hue, stretching long shadows across the floor. Leary stood so close that her presence felt like a quiet current of warmth moving beside him, her pale blue skin softly illuminated by the glow slipping through his fingers. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers or accidental company. It had weight, intention, a shared breath held in anticipation of what the fragile device might reveal. Leary drew a slow, steady inhale. "It is trying again," she whispered. "The core only attempts to complete a memory when there is enough emotional resonance." Ethan looked at her gently. "So it feels safer now." She hesitated, eyes lowering. "Not safer. Supported." The device flickered, a thin stripe of blue light stretching upward. Ethan steadied it with the lightest shift of his grip. Leary watched the shimmer grow, her expression tightening with a mix of hope and fear. The hologram formed slowly, like mist pulling itself together. At first, it was only the outline of a child's small frame, soft, trembling, incomplete. Then a gentle sound filled the bay, barely louder than a whisper. Leary's breath caught. Ethan glanced at her, but said nothing. The message was not for him. The small figure lifted its hand again, the same reaching gesture, but now the movement carried more clarity, more intent. The child leaned closer to the projection's edge, her voice shaping into words broken by static. Leary stepped forward instinctively, her fingers hovering above the image. "She is trying to speak," she murmured. "I can feel it." The projection pulsed, as if encouraged by her voice. A faint phrase took form, fragile, flickering, like a memory surfacing through shallow water. "Sister, do not." The rest dissolved too quickly, swept away before Leary could grasp it. She closed her eyes, exhaling a breath that trembled at the edges. "Always the same point," she whispered. "The message breaks right before the meaning appears." Ethan's voice was calm, steady. "Maybe it needs time. Or maybe it needs you to be ready." Leary opened her eyes slowly, turning toward him. Her expression carried a vulnerability she could no longer hide. "I want to know what she tried to tell me. But part of me fears that I failed her somehow." Ethan shook his head gently. "You did not fail her. You were both caught in something bigger than either of you could control." Leary's gaze softened, the tension in her shoulders easing as his words settled. "My people would disagree," she said quietly. "They believe loss must be buried so it cannot weaken us." Ethan studied her face, the fragile conflict in her eyes. "Loss does not weaken you. It shapes you. It reminds you of what mattered." Leary's breath trembled. "Then why does it hurt?" Ethan answered softly. "Because you loved her. And love leaves echoes." For a heartbeat, Leary did not move. Then she stepped closer, the glow of the device lighting the space between them. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "if the final message appears, I want you to hear it with me. Not because you must, but because your presence makes the fear feel smaller." Ethan nodded once, slow and certain. "I will not leave." The device pulsed again, warm and steady, as if acknowledging the promise that filled the quiet room. The soft blue pulse inside the cracked device brightened, just enough to cast a faint halo across Ethan Cole's hands. It felt warmer now, not in temperature but in presence, like something inside it had finally gathered the courage to surface. Outpost 12's night cycle had grown so still that even the distant hum of the upper conduits seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet tremor of the device and the steady rhythm of two people waiting. Leary stood inches from him, her pale blue skin glowing softly under the low amber lights, her breath slow and controlled as she gazed at the fragile shell between his palms. The weight in her eyes was different now. No longer fear. No longer hesitation. Something steadier. Something braced for truth. "It is ready," she whispered. The words were almost fragile enough to vanish into the dim air. Ethan nodded once, his grip steady. "Then let it speak." The device answered with a gentle vibration, a soft note rising from its core, followed by a thin beam of blue light stretching upward. The projection formed slowly this time, as if taking care not to break itself the way it had so many times before. A small figure appeared, clearer than any attempt that had come before, her outline steady, her glow unmistakable. Leary's sister, a child no older than 8 by human comparison, her tiny frame wrapped in the same pale blue light that shimmered across Leary's skin. She looked upward, as if searching for someone. Then her voice arrived, soft but whole, the kind of voice that carried innocence even through static tremors. "Sister," the projection said, her tone light, hopeful. Leary inhaled sharply, her hand instinctively reaching toward the image without touching it. The child continued, her face turning as if she were looking directly at Leary, standing in the bay. "Do not follow me. Do not be afraid." Leary's breath wavered. Her fingers trembled in the air. The projection flickered, then steadied again, the words coming clearer, stronger. "I wanted you to know. I am not alone. Do not blame yourself. You always protected me." A small smile formed on the child's face, soft and bright. "Keep being brave, the way you taught me." Leary let out a quiet sound, something between a breath and a broken sigh. Ethan felt her hand brush the edge of his arm, not intentionally, but drawn there by something deeper than awareness. The projection brightened one last time, as if offering its final gift. "I love you, sister." And then the hologram dimmed, shrinking back into a soft glow that dissolved slowly into the cracked shell. The device fell silent. Not broken, just finished. Leary stood motionless for a long moment, her breath caught somewhere between relief and ache. Her hand lowered from the air and rested lightly on the back of Ethan's wrist, the touch gentle, unthinking, like instinct meeting solace. "She was not afraid," Leary whispered. All this time, she was not afraid. Ethan lowered the now quiet device, holding it carefully between them. "She wanted you to have peace," he said softly, "and she gave you her last words to carry it." Leary looked up at him then, her eyes luminous under the dim lights, shimmering with gratitude and something deeper, something new and quiet and real. There was no speech, no dramatic reaction, just a long moment where she held his gaze, letting the silence say what her voice could not yet reach. The device rested between their hands, no longer trembling. And for the first time since he had entered the service bay, the weight in the room did not come from loss, but from connection, gentle, steady, and shared in a way that needed no explanation. The night hum of Outpost 12 wrapped around them, soft and distant, as Leary closed her fingers around the device and whispered, "Thank you for holding it with me." Ethan met her eyes, calm and steady. "You did not have to carry it alone." The lights above them flickered faintly, reflecting in her gaze like tiny stars, and for a moment that neither of them broke, the quiet felt warm enough to heal.